Coming up next on Columbus Connections, Columbus is full of history. We'll tell you what the National Civil War Naval Museum is doing. Welcome to Columbus Connections. I am your host, David Britt, and today we are here to talk about history, American history, African American history, history of Columbus. If you're a history buff, this is what you want to watch. If you've never been to the National Civil War Naval Museum, or if it's been a while since you've been there, I'm going to tell you why you should really want to go. As a matter of fact, I brought somebody with me to help explain it. How you doing?
Hey, I'm great, thank you.
Tell everybody who you are and what you do with the museum.
My name is Jeff Seymour, and I'm the historian and curator of the museum. And I do the research, take care of the artifacts, and I help put together programs for public.
Yeah. Now, you're the first curator I've spoken with. It's always been an interesting thing of what you guys do. And you say that you take care of the artifacts, and do you? What's your schedule? What's your life like?
My life is very different every day.
Yeah.
So it's a very challenging thing to come to work because it's usually something very different. A curator takes care or curates the collection of the museum. And at our facility, we have a wide range of materials, just wood, metal, textiles. And so each of these items require a different set of skills to take care of. With the metal, you don't want it to rust. With the textiles, you don't want them to fall apart. So the idea is to protect these things for the longest time period possible. And there's science and math involved for kids out there interested in STEM. There's a lot of science and math, chemistry of how metal reacts with different materials and so forth, how wood reacts. So I've got to learn a lot about how wood reacts with one item or another and how best to protect those things for future. And some items it's really difficult for us to deal with, but on the other hand, some items are really good, and those are the ones we typically have out on display.
Right.
And each one requires almost a unique set of skills to make sure that it's out for the public to see. Right. It's a way to make history come alive. But on the other hand, you don't always get to touch it, and that's always,
because you're in a museum.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's
now the museum. If you've ever been down Victory Drive and you're going around the curve toward the Civic Center, you see the large ship outside.
Yes, sir.
What is the significance of the National Civil War Naval Museum to Columbus?
Well, it's a great way for this community to understand how it played a role in what's going on the national stage. It's not just, well, local people are kind of stuck in a niche and they're not really aware of what's going on in the wider world around them. Columbus played a very important role during the Civil War on the Confederate side because so much of the industrial complex here, there's Columbus's history as an industrial town. And what ends up happening during the war is that Columbus grows exponentially and turns into the second most important industrial site to the Confederacy. Now, what we do at the museum is not only tell that story, but how the Civil War navies were engaged, how they work. So we're incorporating our local story onto the national stage. And of course, the biggest artifact in our museum is the remains of an ironclad built right here in Columbus. And there are so many connections, not only just basic Confederate Navy connection, but there are labor issues dealing with, some men trying to get out of serving in the Confederate Army. But you've also got free and enslaved African Americans who are working in the Navy Yard there. So it's a strange combination of things going on right here in Columbus, and it kind of, if we tell it right and get people to come down and realize how crazy life is, not just back then, but now it makes those connections, makes that history come alive.
Yeah, and for such a long time, it was known as the Confederate Naval Museum,
Yes.
which of course that in itself carries a lot of controversy. But with it being the National Civil War Navy Museum, and even with you guys are doing a Black History program, and it's telling the story of African Americans from the Columbus community that have contributed to the Navy and have big contributions all around.
Well, it's not just Columbus. We're talking about on a national scale. Locally, we've got several pretty prominent individuals that are related in some way, they're connected in some way to what the Navy's doing here, like Horace King.
Right.
Now, Horace King came here in 1832 to build a bridge. And so many of the bridges across the rivers here. Now, as time goes on, Horace King becomes a free man. He begins operating his own businesses.
Wow.
And that's a plural. One of the biggest business that he has is a sawmill. When the Civil War begins, when the Confederate Navy begins constructing that ironclad to Jackson, much of the wood that the Confederate Navy is purchasing is coming from Horace King's sawmill.
Wow.
So
So that's I didn't know that. So Horace King was a slave, and so he gained his freedom, started businesses, and the businesses that he was running was the Confederate Navy was purchasing from his businesses.
Yes, sir, that is
Wow.
correct. So here's a guy who's living in a complex society.
Absolutely.
And he's a businessman. He's trying to do the best for his family. He's trying to put food on the table and live and to be quite frank, for African Americans, it's not an easy time.
Right.
But here he is becoming a very successful businessman and doing a great number of things, even in the midst of the problems of slavery.
Wow. Wow.
So it's not an unusual story. It's a little uncommon, but not necessarily unusual.
All right. And speaking of that, it not being unusual, tell me about the events you all are having and some of the people that you all are highlighting.
Well, for our Black History program, Lift Every Voice, we're focusing on 5 individuals, such as Horace King, whose story, whose voice you normally don't get to hear. Now, we're also, of these 5, along with Horace King, we've got 2 ladies. Both of these women have some connection to the war. Mm-hmm. Mary LaVestre, she was a woman that we really don't know a lot about. She kind of appears in the record and then disappears. So here's a woman that, like many slaves, they're kind of invisible. But her story is that she's a spy and she steals the plans to one of the Confederates' ironclads and delivers them to U.S. Navy authorities.
Wow.
So she walks for several weeks as a slave. She's basically ignored, but if she ever got caught, I mean, she lives under the threat of
Right.
death or any number of things, most likely death. But she delivers those plans to actually Gideon Welles, the Secretary of the Navy for the United States. Another woman, in her story is similar to Horace King. She's a free woman, and she's married to a slave, though. Mm-hmm. Their name is Dallas. His name is Moses Dallas, but her name is Harriet Dallas. Mm-hmm. Moses Dallas was a boat pilot. Now, in order for him to engage in his business, he had to remain, under Georgia law, a slave. Mm-hmm. However, Harriet, his wife, was a free woman. And to give you an idea of how lucrative his business was, he's a businessman. He was making $100 a month as a boat pilot. Because here's a guy who needs to know the local waters, right, where the currents are, the snags, all of those things. His knowledge is in high demand just for transportation. He's making $100 a month, and compare that to an average factory worker that's making $13 to $15 a month.
Right. You're a curator and you're big on history. How it seems like we only hear when talking about Black History Month. We only hear about Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. How do people find out about those type of people that have done such great things that often go unheard?
These stories are there. One of the biggest problems as a historian that we have is how do you get these stories out there? Mm-hmm. And quite often I hear people complain that, well, they never teach that in school. And well, the problem that school teachers have is they've got a limited amount of time, right. But these stories are out there. And it's a shame that Black History Month is relegated to 1 month. It's just there. There's so many great stories. And sometimes it just takes a matter of getting up and going to the library.
Right.
Googling something online. What they're out there. Can you take the time to find some of these stories? And of course, these are some of our favorite stories at the museum. Where I didn't mention 2 other individuals that we're spotlighting for the Black History program. Both of them were free men that served in the U.S. Navy. One, Charles Fisher, served on a USS Kearsarge, and he crossed the Atlantic. He was a world traveler. And he saw a great deal of the world during the Civil War. And the other one was a man who served aboard the USS Hartford, which was the flagship of Admiral David Farragut. And the Hartford, going into Mobile Bay, this is where Admiral Farragut supposedly yelled out, "Damn the torpedoes, full steam ahead." Well, there's a gentleman who was in the U.S. Navy. He ends up winning the Medal of Honor, and he's an African American. So he's one of the first recipients of the Medal of Honor for the U.S. Navy, and he's an African American. Now the thing about it is that free men of color were in the Navy, serving in the Navy long before the Civil War. In fact, during the Civil War, the U.S. Navy is more integrated than what you would find as such like World War II.
Gotcha.
So it's a strange thing for us to think about way back then. Well, men of color had a great deal of opportunity in the maritime services. And to them, it didn't matter where you came from. If you knew how to sail a ship,
right.
they wanted you.
Now you all do a program for Black History every year.
Yes.
This is you've been doing it for 10 years.
For about 10 years now.
Yeah. And what are some of the other things that you all do throughout the year?
Oh gosh. Well, our next program coming up, we're doing our annual River Blast, and that'll be the last weekend in March. That's March 24, 25, 26. And we're bringing in actors, reenactors. They portray Generals Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant.
Gotcha.
And they'll be really focusing on their relationship with the navies, because both men had ties to the Navy. In fact, Robert E. Lee's brother was a naval officer. And a lot of what Lee had to do early in his part of the war is defending against U.S. Navy attacks on the Confederate coast. And then Ulysses S. Grant, one of the things that he had to work with throughout his Civil War service was combined arms operations with the Navy. His famous attack on the 2 forts in Tennessee, unconditional surrender Grant, trying to crack Vicksburg in 1863. All of these things, he's working with the Navy, trying to make those campaigns successful.
Gotcha. Now, tell me the time and place for Lift Every Voice.
Lift Every Voice, Lift Every Voice. We're going to do 2 tours on February the 18th, one at 11 and then one at 2 o'clock.
Gotcha. Now we're going to take a quick break. We're going to hear from one of the actors. We're going to get a monologue from him, so you're going to get to know what you have to look forward to. And also, if anybody, because you guys do a lot of events, it's a great museum, you can rent the museum. I've been to some of the events and plays there. Tell people how they can get in contact with the Naval Museum.
Well, the first thing that most people like to do now is through our website and www.portcolumbus, that's port, not fort, port, because this is the Navy, portcolumbus.org. Our telephone number is 706-327-9798, and we'd love to hear from you, and come on down and get a tour.
All right. We'll be right back. This is Columbus Connections.
I present to you Algebra 2, Foreign Languages, and finally, Biology. Who among you will step up to their challenge?
Me.
Yeah, I'll do it. Me too. Sign me up.
Take on the tough classes now. You need them to prepare for college.
Welcome back to Columbus Connections. We are talking with the National Naval, I just messed that up, Museum, the National Civil War Naval Museum, and they're doing some great things. Columbus has a lot of history, not just Columbus history, not just black history, but national history, American history, and that's what we're talking about. Now, we spoke to Jeff Seymour, who is the curator of the museum, and now we're going to be speaking with Mustafa Slack, and he is an actor who is portraying Horace King. They're going to be doing it in Lift Every Voice, and they're talking about African Americans from the Civil War era, who you may not have even heard of, but have done awesome things that should be talked about. Mustafa, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, let's talk about just you for a second. Now, you're a theater major at Columbus State.
Yes, sir.
Are you from Columbus, or where are you from?
I'm from Austell, Georgia. It's a little town, a little bit outside of Atlanta.
Gotcha. And the theaters, because we see Columbus State University downtown a lot. They just had a big symposium for Georgia thespians.
Okay.
What drew you to Columbus, or what made you decide to choose here as your area of major?
I actually didn't plan on acting until I was more than halfway through with my senior year of high school. I didn't even think of it as really a possibility until then. But I got done doing a monologue because I took an acting class for school because I thought it was fun. And she came up to me afterwards and said, "Have you thought about doing this for like a career?" And I was like, "No," because it's not. Many people don't see that as realistic.
Right.
And I wasn't raised in a household that saw that as like
Absolutely.
a possibility. But ended up auditioning for CSU. And I got in, and I've loved it. I've been doing it ever since.
Now, going back to that, people usually say you can be a doctor. They say you can be whatever you want to be, a doctor or a lawyer, and they kind of stop there. And when you talk about theater, they'll sit there and watch the Oscars, and then not see being a theater or being an actor or a thespian as a realistic career.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that, or what are the options, or what do you, with so many people that want to do this, what happens after you graduate? What's the next step?
That's the scary part. You just have to go out and just put yourself out there, make a lot of connections, and work your tail off, pretty much. I mean, you have to put in the work, and I'm a believer in you get what you put into it.
And also, I think just the experience is because you learn after a while that everybody is not about making all the most money, but you may to perform on Broadway, to travel the world, and to enjoy, to be able to teach and give back. Or there are so many things that in the end you just want to do something you enjoy doing without pulling all your hair out to be able to do it.
Yeah, that's what it's about. I mean, I don't think you can do this unless you love it.
Yeah.
You have to love it, or else you'll get tired of it. You'll start craving something that gives you maybe more money, something like that. So you have to love it.
Right. So you're playing Horace King. How did you go about, training and becoming Horace and learning the role?
For me, it's about anything I do. It's always about capturing the essence of a character that you're trying to portray. Like, what's the first thing you think of when you think of this person? First thing I think of when I think of Horace King is his willpower. He's going to do what he has to do to support his family financially, and just make all of that, make their life stable, even if he has to do more than he might want to. And he had to do work for the Confederacy, but he had to do that because it's what it took
Right.
for his family to survive.
And that's a big part to me, because here in Columbus we hear about the bridge and that he built the bridge. It was a great black African American who built the bridge that's still standing, and that was a great thing. But to be an African American in that time and to go from being a slave to being an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and part of your business is supplying the Naval Confederacy, it's got to be, it's pretty complex.
It's a crazy world.
Now, in studying him, that's what that stuck out to you. What did you learn? Had you ever heard of Horace King, or?
I had not heard of Horace King.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's might be because I'm not from Columbus, but just even in the monologue, some of the stuff I talk about, it's crazy that somebody who was a slave was able to do all this stuff so soon after the Civil War. Like, he served on he served on the Alabama General Assembly for 4 years, 2 terms. Like, that's, you asked Mustafa like a month ago.
Yeah.
I thought you were trying to make a movie or something about a fictional character.
Yeah.
But
Well, we're going to get into the monologue when we come right back. Remember this face. This is the second time he's been on TV. So when he's accepting this Emmy, I'm going to be putting this on his Facebook page and telling him that don't forget about me. But again, the National Civil War Naval Museum off of Victory Drive. Go there, support it. Every year they're doing things for African American history. They're doing things for history in Columbus year round. So go support it and support these type of programs, because you're learning things that you didn't know, and these are really big, really important things, again, for our area and for our country and for everybody in this country. Again, thanks for watching. Don't go anywhere, though, because when you come back, you're going to get to see Mustafa. That's Horace King.
Bicycles are fun at any age. Just remember the rules of the road when you're out enjoying a bike ride. And motorists, when you're sharing the road with cyclists, use caution and give at least 3 feet when passing. Bicycles are safe, fun, and sensible. When you ride, be visible, be predictable, and be alert. You'll have a safe ride and a great time. Let's get there together, Georgia. A message from the Governor's Office of Highway Safety and Georgia Bikes.
the carrying power of a bridge is not in the strength of its pillars, but the strength of its weakest pillar. What is great in man is that he is a bridge. I got a fondness for bridges and a certain familiarity with them too. I, Horace King, am a colored man. By just looking at me, you'd think I was the weakest pillar, but I have you know, I built a career as a self-taught bridge builder, architect, and engineer. My reputation around these parts is one of great integrity and respect. Now, I served 2 terms on the Alabama General Assembly from 1868 to 1872. I like to think of myself as a bridge that helps some folks rise above the limits of slavery and segregation. I was born in 1807 to slaves from Sherrill, Mississippi, South Carolina. We were the property of John Godwin, a contractor who specialized in building bridges and houses. It was with them that I learned the trade of bridge building. Now, in the early 1830s, Columbus, Georgia issued an ad to help build a bridge that would span over the Chattahoochee River. We went in and we got our first job. City Bridge, spanning 560 feet, it connected Girard to Columbus. It stood until 1865, when it was destroyed in the Civil War. But this was just the beginning. My reputation spread, and I soon caught the attention of an Alabama legislator. Together, we built roads across Georgia, bridges spanning the Chattahoochee, and even helped reconstruct the Alabama state capitol in 1849. He also helped me gain my freedom in 1846. I always stayed true to the Union, even though people told me that I would be killed if I spoke against the Confederacy. I was a resident of the South, not a citizen. Citizens had a voice. Negroes in Georgia had no voice, no political, no civil, no social rights whatsoever. No matter, I stood by the Union. And any work I did for the Confederacy, be it building bridges across the Chattahoochee, supplying lumber for the CSS Lewis, which I helped build, I did so because I was obliged to. Throughout my life, I did what I was obliged to do so that my family could persevere. I had to be the bridge. That's it.
Did you all just see that? Okay, that's just a piece. That's just one of them. So now you see what you have to look forward to. If you didn't get it this year, they do it every year. So again, this is a great thing to support. Thanks for watching. Thanks for all of my guests today. We'll see you next time.